So in the early 2000s, the owner of our house sold a field that wrapped around the back of the house to Washington County. This brick building here that's currently the public restroom is built in the same shape and size of the office that was attached to the livery stable. That was a wooden structure that was built over the top of the creek and wrapped around this building. Part of that agreement, part of that sale, was to have 2 parking spaces in front of the property, with ownership transferred to future owners of the house. So the last descendant of A.S. Murray made that agreement, believed it was in good standing, and was serviced by that agreement for about 10 years before she passed. The town, after we purchased the property, claimed that this actually isn't Washington County's parking lot, it's actually Cherokee Street. And therefore the county did not have the right to give parking spaces to the owner of the property. Therefore the agreement was unlawful. The agreement was signed by the mayor of Jonesboro at that time. Cherokee Street clearly has been abandoned. There's no question in anyone's mind about that, except legally it was never abandoned. So we were kind of sort of okay with that, as long as the town agreed to allow us to park, which they did. And they dutifully provided signage to prevent others from parking. No parking on this side of the street. And then, of course, the 2 parking spaces that are in front of the house. They also painted the yellow line across the street and informed the police department. The police department sat down at a table with us. We talked about helping with issuing parking tickets to offenders, and they agreed. And that was the cause of my reaction to the police department refusing to issue parking tickets to offenders, which was the subject of that other video. Now, there are a couple of things that I did not cover in the on-site portion of the video that I need to also document in order to close this topic. As mentioned, the sale agreement for the field that later became the Washington County parking lot had 3 forms of payment documented within it. One was payment for the land, second was relief against back taxes that were due, and the third being the provision of the 2 parking spaces. So the 2 parking spaces were a form of payment, and when Washington County refused to honor that agreement, you could say that I could then have a position where the land was therefore not executed, the sale was not executed, because one of the forms of payment was never provided, or at least has not been provided recently. And since that term was indefinite and forever and transferred to future owners, any future owner that was not serviced by the agreement that Washington County did not allow to park in front of the house would in fact then be able to reclaim ownership of that land since payment was not completed. Now, it's a small portion of the payment, and therefore we've not taken that position, but legally we have the basis to do that. We don't intend to, not at this point anyway, because the issue seems to have been finally resolved. The other part that was not disclosed in the video was that when Washington County built the public restroom, their permit was of course issued by themselves in order to build that building. The building was built on the existing location for the livery stable office. It wasn't built on the original foundation because the foundation was removed. What existed was removed. but the building was built exactly on the same spot. What Washington County and their builders did not seem to care to check was that when you survey the land, you discover that the building eaves overhang of the roof in fact extends right up to the property line, and therefore they set the fence back by about 2 feet. In some places it's 3.5 feet, but on average it's about 2 feet. So Washington County built a 10-foot tall wooden fence to contain our property. Our property was at that point in serious disrepair and was a danger to the public. So they built a very large 10-foot fence around the property to keep people from it. But they built that fence 2 to 3 feet onto our side of the property line. And when we came to put our driveway in up to the property line, it in fact extends beyond where the fence is and up to the where the gutter is of the building, which prevents us from ever erecting a fence. We don't need to, but it was questioned why my driveway was wider than the fence, and of course that explanation closed that conversation. So there are quite a few aspects to this that were a little unclear. A couple of people had commented on the video that I seem to be rather agitated by the topic, and I fully agree. My level of aggression towards those officers was perhaps more than I normally would have done, but it's because of this extensive backstory. Over a period of 3 years, I was in discussion with Washington County and the town of Jonesboro trying to resolve this. Washington County claimed that we never had an agreement, the previous owner never had an agreement, that the documents that we found in Washington County Registry of Deeds were not enforceable because they were a one-sided document and had not been executed by both parties. They had in fact documented this issue in the deed, and we have a deed that is fully executed and registered that documents the parking spots. So my argument with them, of course, is that deeds are only ever executed by one party. They're not executed by both, but there is in fact a sale agreement that was documented and signed that was fully descriptive. But because Washington County did not have a copy or couldn't find a copy of that sale agreement, they claim we had to obtain that detail from the folks that were initially willed the rights to these spaces from the previous owner. So we ended up not continuing the conversation with Washington County because it was clearly getting us nowhere. We were facing having to sue the county, which we didn't want to have to do, not at the time anyway. The town stepped up and reached agreement with us. We don't believe that Cherokee Street is still a Cherokee Street because it clearly was abandoned by the building of a 20-foot brick wall across it, a monstrous embankment, and of course the railroad crossing. The railroad department has no crossing at that point. The railroad's been there since 1856. And yes, Cherokee Street existed at that time, but the railroad has informed us that they have no documented agreement with the town to have a street crossing of the railroad tracks. So it was very strange, poorly documented. Most of the agreements appeared around it to have been done by handshakes. So we concluded and were satisfied by having a 10-year lease, renewable for the term of 10 years, perpetually, from the town for the price of $1 for these 2 spaces on Cherokee Street. And the conditions around it were that We would maintain it. We wouldn't use it for anything other than parking. We wouldn't build anything on it. That we would post the signage, the no parking signage that they in fact had instructed us and had printed for us. And that the Jonesboro Police Department would enforce the no parking and issue parking tickets, etc. So we were happy with all that until the police department, the police chief particularly, started to declare that he had no knowledge of that, that it was a private issue, and if we wanted to enforce parking, we had to go sue the town. That is what got me riled and caused that video to show just how agitated I was over what you might think is a small issue with regard to parking outside our house.